Ben Johnson's first season as head coach was all about learning these Chicago Bears players and how it fits in he and Dennis Allen's schemes. Now we have a much better sense of what worked well and what needs to change.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And on the show today, we're going to go through some of the lessons that came out of this Bears season under Ben Johnson, what we really learned about this team and its players on offense, where boy, when that thing was firing on all cylinders, it looked unstoppable. But no, it didn't always get up to speed super quickly there, but certainly gave us some real answers about all of the different additions the Bears made in the offseason. Same thing on defense, where they found a way to make it work, but, you know, we learned a lot of good and bad for the moves they made. Maybe some more work to be done there, but some reassurance, I think, in Dennis Allen in the playoffs, where we saw this defense finally kind of get everything together and look a little bit more like a cohesive group that gives you more hope for the future here. But I think when I start with this Bears offense, I think a lot of this process is Ben Johnson comes in and he can watch the tape on some of these guys and imagine how he might build an offense around them. But part of getting to know them is on the fly while you're installing that offense that you're trying to build around them. And so I think there's always going to be a give and take there of trying things along the way, seeing what's working and seeing what's not working. And now that he's got a full year under his belt, he knows thoroughly what Caleb Williams does well and doesn't do well, what DeAndre Swift does well and doesn't do well, the offensive line, the receivers across the board. And I think now he's in a much better position to tweak things to sort of fine tune what's going to work best for everybody. But I think from our perspective, when we think about what we learned about this Ben Johnson offense, at least for in the Chicago Bears version, we saw that it wasn't just instant, reliable, steady offense from start to finish of every ball game. Like it wasn't as quick or as fast acting or as reliable as maybe we had thought or hoped this season. Not to say that it was, bad or, super underachieving or super underwhelming, but there were times when the offense just couldn't get out of the gate. But we did see that when they are in rhythm and dialed in and really playing some of their best football, it's close to unstoppable when Caleb Williams is making the types of plays he makes, when these receivers are making the types of plays that they make, and when this line is blocking to the level that it can block. Not very many defenses had answers for the best versions of this Bears offense. They had answers when they were sputtering out of the gate, when they were committing penalties and missing throws here and there, or miscommunicating routes and all sorts of little things where they would kind of trip and fall and get in their own ways in a lot of areas. And that's a big thing that they'll need to work on in the future. But it was simultaneously both everything we thought Ben Johnson's offense would be when it was working properly, and also a little less consistent and a little slower to start than we thought it might be, given how successful Ben Johnson had been with Detroit. And I think it's not to say that that's not going to improve, but I think that that's all normal, year one of everyone trying to learn it. There's going to be some kinks and some little things that you got to work out throughout that process. So I think that was a big part of what we learned was hey, yeah, wait a minute. It's a really good offense, but it's going to take some time, and it required maybe even a little more patience than we initially wanted to give for it. But along that way, I think we learned pretty well that this Bears offensive line is set, that they've got their guys and they're all under contract. And we'll talk, I want to do a whole podcast episode about this in the near future, about how that conversation is muddied a little bit by Ozzie Trapillo's injury so late in this process and now lingering through the offseason. But your left guard through right tackle for sure, who they're going to be. And you have a lot of confidence in that group when they are healthy, playing at a really high level and giving you high quality offensive line play. Along with that, I think we should keep in mind that the Bears were fairly lucky in how healthy the offensive line in particular stayed this season. Obviously, Left tackle had some changes here and there, but that wasn't even all injury-based, right? They chose to bench Braxton Jones, and even I think Theo Benedict, got banged up a little bit, but wasn't a major injury situation. And then Ozzie Trapillo, main injury happened in the playoffs late in the process, but I think he missed the Detroit game in there. But again, for the most part, a pretty healthy group. Darnell Wright was definitely dealing with injuries the whole time, but only missed one game, and otherwise it was steady, Tooney, Dahlman, Jackson, Wright across the board there. And we knew coming into the season that Jonah Jackson has an injury history, Drew Dahlman has an injury history, and that it was possible they stayed healthy and it was possible they dealt with injuries. And so I think a fully healthy season from them does not mean, now they're never going to get hurt ever again, ever seriously. So I think we should appreciate that they were so healthy and anticipate that, hey, odds are you're not going to have all 5 offensive linemen for all 17 games every season. You can hope that the way that they're being used and the way the training staff is working with them is working, and it makes them more durable now than they have been in the past in their career. But I think we can also say, hey, offensive line depth will be more important in the future, maybe even than it was this year, when they didn't really have to go to backups anywhere on the interior for any real stretch of the season. But you still feel wow, the starters there are really good. And same thing with the Bears' weapons. It just kind of confirmed, we came into the season with questions just how good is Colston Loveland, right? Just how good is Luther Burton? How much can we expect of them as rookies? And they both started slow after being injured to begin their Bears careers in the offseason. So as expected, they started slow. And then now, they look like absolute studs at their positions. Rome Odunze was taking a lot of steps forward before his injury late in the season. DJ Moore was a real versatile weapon in this Bears offense this season, and we'll see what his future is going to look like. We talked about the trade possibilities a little bit, on yesterday's podcast, looking at some of the praise the Bears have been heaping at DJ Moore, so go take a listen to that one if you haven't yet already for more of the DJ Moore talk. But I think what it confirmed for us was that this set of weapons as they have right now can do everything you need them to do. They can not only, obviously there's still room for improvement. They need to drop fewer passes and have fewer miscommunications. That's not to say that they are perfect, but it's that they are capable of everything you need them to do. You don't go into this offseason needing any more weapons. You can always add more. You can always take more, but needing any more weapons. And that you don't even just have guys that can plug in and do their jobs as good soldiers, but can go above and beyond the play. That Colston Loveland is someone on third down and critical. He's going to catch it and hold on to it and take the hit over the middle of the field. Luther Burden is the type of receiver that can catch a 3-yard pass on 3rd and 10 and pick up a first down by himself with his legs by making guys miss. Right? It's not just that, they've got a nice variety of weapons, but they have difference makers. That's what we learned. We knew there was talent on the weapons, but difference makers, game changers, playmakers, not just guys that Ben Johnson can scheme up to success. So all in all, I think we come away obviously very encouraged with this Bears offense, with also understanding that they can get even better. This group was barely scratching the surface, and they finished 9th in points scored this season and 6th in yards gained this season. They were a top 10 passing offense and a top 5 rushing offense. And man, it didn't feel like they were really doing their best out there. So what does even better look like next season? That's what's going to be really exciting. Certainly we should expect the defense needs to get better next season. And I think as this season went on, it became so normal that this Bears defense was struggling. But I think in hindsight, it should have been at least a little bit more of a surprise how bad this Bears defense played at times. I think we did learn this season that group isn't as good as we thought and is going to now need more work than we once thought. So we'll explore that side of the ball and what we learned about Dennis Allen as well next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Rocket Money. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming. Between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and just trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month, it's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, it monitors your spendings, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I like it because I used to have to log into all the different apps, right? I got to log into my credit card app, my bank account app, my retirement account app, Everything in one place in Rocket Money, one app. I can open up, see all of my expenses and revenues, income, all in the same place. It's super helpful and super useful. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/locked on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. rocketmoney.com/locked on. The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or the guesswork. So instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they'll handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. It's a huge time saver, and it gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. Just how we learned who was the right fit in this Bears offense, I think we started to learn the same thing about the defense. The Dennis Allen is going to have specific types of guys he likes in his defense and maybe doesn't like as much in his defense. And I think we started to see a bit of both as this year went on. But I think big picture, first and foremost, we learned that this Bears defense still has a long way to go. I think in the offseason, you could talk yourself into feeling like, hey, they did add Odengbo and Grady Jarrett to the defensive line. They got their linebackers back. They got good players in the secondary and Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker and even Kevin Byard. And there was a competition at one of the cornerback spots, but the other outside cornerback spot, but you could kind of live with that. And it kind of felt like, man, everything else is more or less set. We knew pass rush would have some questions and be a concern, but it didn't necessarily feel like it was going to completely derail everything you want to do on defense. And I think that whole unit turned out to be worse than we might have expected. Maybe not drastically worse than expected, but a bit worse than we expected. And I think after giving up 52 to Detroit in week 2, I think we all kind of just waved the white flag and said, all right, defense is going to be bad this season, so let's get used to it. And I think as a result, we kind of take for granted that it was a little bit worse than expected at a number of points this season. And to me, that's less reflective on the coaching staff, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and more respective on the personnel. I think we learned a lot more about Bears personnel, good and bad, this season than maybe we even did Dennis Allen as a coach. I think in part because Dennis Allen is a veteran coach and it isn't necessarily, you're not learning a lot of new stuff about Dennis Allen. Not to say that he doesn't change at all, but just that, he kind of has a track record of how he calls defenses and has mostly continued that with the Chicago Bears. But for example, on this Bears pass rush, I think we all kind of learned that this group is a lot of, underachievers. I don't know if that's too harsh, but there's a group of guys that didn't take that next step forward. That doesn't mean none of them showed any improvement, but none of them took that leap. I think we talked in the offseason last year leading up of okay, there's some gambles here, right? You need Montez Sweat to get back to being a big-time difference maker. You need Gervon Dexter to take that big leap forward. You need Austin Booker or Dayo Odengbo to really establish themselves as big-time players. And you need Grady Jarrett to have a bounce-back year after struggling down the stretch in Atlanta, but kind of get back to playing his style of football. And I don't know that we really saw any of those. I don't think Montez Sweat had a bad season, but I don't think he had a great season. He had a fine season. He had a B plus kind of year, right? He's not getting A's. He got to the double-digit sack numbers. He had pretty good pressure numbers and was pretty good against the run. He's a pretty good player. I think we want him to be a great player, and he's a pretty good player. And so that's its own set of challenges. But I think the longer he's on this current contract, the more affordable it will feel. Now that Micah Parsons is getting almost double per year what Montez Sweat is. Sweat feels a bit more affordable than when they gave him that big contract. I feel like you needed him to be more than this, but maybe you can kind of get by if he can consistently be this for a few more seasons. But like, he didn't take that superstar leap forward. Same thing with Gervon Dexter. Like, yeah, I think he finished with whatever it ended up being, 6 sacks this past season, but he did not have the kind of pressure numbers you would like to see him as a pass rusher there. I mean, he made improvements for sure, but it wasn't this like big leap from one year, from year 2 to year 3. And he wasn't always the most consistent in the running game either. Like, to give you an example, last year he had 39 total pressures in terms of sacks, hits, and hurries. This year he had 44. So he had 5 more in this, but a lot of that was because he rushed the passer almost 100 more snaps. So per pass rush, he was actually less efficient in terms of pressures per pass rushing snap this season than he was the year before. Like, he was okay, but for like a second round pick in year 3, you're going to need better from Gervon Dexter next year if you're going to even think about giving him a contract extension, right? Grady Jarrett, obviously significantly underwhelming there. Dayo Odengbo, after getting the big free agent contract, yeah, I can't be mad at him for getting injured. That's not his fault. But in the 8 games he played before he got injured, he had 1 sack, and it was in the first game of the season. He was not generating a pass rush consistently whatsoever, and has all the makings of a free agent bust. I'm not ready to definitively say, he won't ever be any good, because he's still a young player, and we can see how the injury recovery goes, and maybe he can still give you more. But man, it's unlikely given the current trajectory that he's on. And I think part of it is like, we learned that these guys are underachieving, and you're stuck with a lot of them. Like, there's not a lot of change happening there. Andrew Billings is a free agent. Dominic Robinson, I think, is coming up on free agency. I think, no, you might have one more year of Dominic Robinson, but Chris Williams, like some of your Joe Tryon, who you traded for, he's a free agent. Like, you don't have, you got one more year of Dominic Robinson, but you just don't have a lot of change over there. Like, your starters are all back, your top backups are all back. There's not a lot of wiggle room to cut those big salaries either of Dayo Odengbo or Grady Jarrett, barring some kind of trade or some kind of injury settlement type of situation like that. It's a little bit messier up front than we thought it might be. We thought they might have some struggles, but now it feels really messy. It also feels messy in the secondary, where again, the performance wasn't good enough. And it's easy enough to say, well, Jalen Johnson was never healthy this season. Kyler Gordon was barely healthy this season, and that absolutely makes a big difference. But at the same time, like, the other cornerback spot got you a lot of turnovers, but there was a lot of inconsistency there. And too often your depth was not nearly good enough at corner. And too often you had these guys trying to play injured and not giving you good cornerback play. Like, you have to handle that position, that the cornerbacks especially, better. I think the safeties were fine. Kevin Byard obviously played out of his mind, but all 4 of those guys are free agents. All 4 of your safeties are free agents. So that creates another big question. Like, there's a lot of questions in the secondary. Like, I don't think Jalen Johnson or Kyler Gordon are going anywhere, but everything else pretty much up in the air for me at this point. And that's another like obstacle that we're going to have to handle this season that was made messy by what we saw this year. Like, when Brisker plays so well, all of a sudden now he's more likely to leave, even though he stayed healthy. Like, we thought if he's injured, he won't come back. If he is healthy, maybe they'll keep him, but he was strong enough at the end where maybe he priced himself out for the Bears. And then Byard's kind of the reverse. Like, he played really well, but he's old. He's older in the NFL. So how do you gauge that? How much do you pay him? How long of a contract do you give him? Can you expect he's going to lead the NFL in interceptions next year? Probably not. But are you going to pay him like the NFL's leader in interceptions, even though it's not likely he's going to have that many again next year? So there's a lot to figure out there. And I don't think this season made that much clearer. I think we never really got to see everything Dennis Allen wanted to do with Kyler Gordon, for all the talk about him being someone who could do a little bit of everything in the secondary. He was hurt so much, we just never really got to see it. We never really got to see Jalen Johnson be a shutdown number 1 corner, because he was dealing with an injury before the season even started that hampered him all season long. So I'm willing to kind of forgive or write off or almost ignore Jalen Johnson's season and kind of say that was injuries. I'm not super worried yet about him falling off and not being a great cornerback anymore. And then Gordon was literally hurt the whole time. So I just want to make sure like everything else is really steady too, in case those guys deal with more injuries moving forward. But I thought we did get some good confirmation on Dennis Allen and what he brings for the defensive coordinator spot, as well as a couple other spots on this roster I want to hit where I think you found some consistency that maybe even was unexpected in a few spots. So we'll take a look at what else we learned about this Bears defense, and we'll throw in special teams there as well next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Indeed. If you ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know exactly how important that is. Because when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed-sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites, because Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena or any other live event. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. But that's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle, because it puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. I love Gametime because they've got all-in pricing that you can see up front, so there aren't any added fees in the checkout process that make your tickets cost way more than you thought they would. And they even let you see the view from the seat before you buy the ticket to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off. That's $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. I want to thank you again for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. And if you are one of those everydayers that tune in 5 days a week, certainly thank you so much. I mean, you are who we do this podcast for through and through. You are our diehards that ride with us in season, off season, year round. If you want to take your listening to the next level, you can check out the Locked On Everydayers Club, where you'll get access to an ad-free audio feed of Locked On Bears that's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcasting app. Just go to lockedonbears.supercast.com to find out more, and you can always find that link in the show notes and in the description for wherever you tune in to Locked On Bears. But as we look at what we learned about this Bears defense, I think we learned that Dennis Allen is stubborn at times, but he's got the goods, right? Like there were some times this season when it felt like, man, they just keep trying to run all this man coverage and blitz out of that man coverage, and they were getting burned a few times by the Packers and some other teams in those situations. And yet almost every time, Dennis Allen found ways to adjust and figure things out. There were really only 2 games this season where it felt like, man, they just have no answers defensively. It was the Bengals game that the Bears won, and it was the 49ers game that the Bears lost. But every other game, the Bears defense almost, we can throw in the Lions and the Vikings the first 2 games. I guess I'm not talking about the first 2 games, but like as the season went on, it was the 2 shootouts with the Bengals and the 49ers where you just had no answers. Like every time the other team was a step ahead of you. And I suppose that's going to happen sometimes in the NFL. You still certainly want and expect better as things goes on. But like, Dennis Allen found ways to adjust and found ways to get things done. And there were games this season, I think even Detroit at the end and even the Rams game especially, that you lost not because of your defensive struggles, but because your offense couldn't hold serve and couldn't do its part for what the defense was giving you. Like this defense found ways to have success even with injuries on the defensive line, injuries at linebacker, injuries at cornerback. Safety was about the only healthy position for the Bears for this season, which is a kind of an upset when you think about it. But like Dennis Allen knows what he's doing. He knows how to adjust. He knows how to get his defense in positions to play at a high level and be successful. Doesn't always start there. Sometimes a little bit stubborn about trying to make it work a certain way, but he gets there. And I think that's important to know on both ends. It's important to know, hey, there's going to be some stubbornness on this. And also there's going to be some solutions and adjustments on this that balance out, even if it gives you, even if it's not good for your blood pressure. How about that? But one of the other things about this defense that we learned that I wasn't necessarily expecting is that I think it felt like the linebacker position was a bit replaceable. And I'm not sure what that says, if it's wow, this Bears coaching staff is really, really good at identifying linebacker talent, like DeMarco Jackson looking like a starting caliber NFL linebacker, or if it's a reflection of the scheme and the coaching job and saying like, well, in this defense, linebackers just aren't put in the types of positions where you need somebody to be great in order for them to be effective. Because it felt like, for the most part this season, even as Tremaine Edmonds was hurt on and off and TJ Edwards was hurt on and off, there was a drop-off in linebacker play. But rarely was it like, wow, that opposing offense is just eating the Bears linebackers alive. The 49ers did that a little bit, for sure. But like, generally speaking, that position rarely felt like a liability, almost regardless of who is in there. And I don't want to downplay it and say, well, DeMarco Jackson and Noah Sewell were just as good as TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. I don't think it was quite that extreme, but it wasn't nearly as much of a drop-off as you might expect, especially given how much the Bears are paying both of those linebackers. You would think that the third highest paid linebacker in the NFL in Tremaine Edmonds, and then, TJ Edwards is a little bit farther down there, like closer to 20, but still, like, two of the higher paid linebackers in the NFL, you would think there would be a much larger noticeable drop-off when those guys were out. There was a drop-off, just wasn't nearly as big as we might have thought it was. So whether that's that it's the scheme and that linebackers aren't that important, or it's just like, wow, they were pretty good at finding guys like Jalen Reeves-Maybin off the street who could plug and play, DeMarco Jackson off the street who could plug and play. I don't think Noah Sewell was as good as everyone wanted him to be and made him out to be. I think he had a lot of limitations there, but still, like, got the job done most of the time. And I think there's also a reflection that the linebackers weren't stellar when they were healthy. Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards both gave up, I don't want to say easy touchdowns in coverage, but touchdowns that looked too easy and sometimes missed on running plays. Like, I think it's a combination of the linebackers not looking as good as we wanted them to and the backups looking better than we thought they would. But that whole position just kind of felt like, not to say it didn't matter who was out there, but it mattered a lot less who was out there than it did at like cornerback, where there was a huge difference. And sometimes on the defensive line too, when Joe Tryon and Dominic Robinson are pass rushing, you notice it a lot more than when it's Austin Booker and Montez Sweat, stuff like that I think was a bit more noticeable. So that was interesting as I kind of reflected on this season. I want to mention special teams briefly as well. I think what we learned this season is that they're a little rough around the edges here and there, but they're not going to screw you. Like, we saw the Rams get screwed by special teams. We've seen the Packers get screwed by special teams and say, wow, what a big weakness that hurt those teams in critical moments. The Bears special teams, at a minimum, got the job done. They weren't muffing kicks. They weren't getting a ton of penalties. They weren't missing a ton of tackles. I mean, I think if anything, like, what we learned is that Cairo Santos and Torrey Taylor both need some training camp competition. You can't just assume that those guys are 100% infallible, good to go. Like, they were probably your two most inconsistent special teams guys. But in terms of like kickoff coverage, punt return, kickoff return, even like field goal blocking and field goal defending, like, they blocked a couple of kicks. They gave up a couple of big returns, but nothing too crazy. Like, they were, again, rough around the edges, but like, special teams is fine. Like, I don't think they're a top 5, top 10 special teams unit in the NFL. I don't think they're a bottom 5, bottom 10. They're a middle 10 special teams unit, and that's totally fine. That's good with me. I don't need my special teams. I'm not firing Richard Hightower to try and do better, because you can do a lot worse. So like, as long as like the special teams is kind of like the offensive line. Like, when you don't hear their names, usually that's a good thing. And so, or when you're not talking about special teams, that's usually a good thing, because it just means they're not causing you problems. So I'm happy with that. And like I said, the only real thing is like, get me some kicker competition for Santos. Doesn't mean you have to like cut him outright and just make the change, but get some real competition, not just like some undrafted free agent off the street necessarily. And same thing at punter. Get me a punter competition. I don't care that you drafted Torrey Taylor in the 4th round. He's extremely mediocre and let you down in some really key spots. Get me some competition in there, and if that competition is better, make the change. I don't care. Like, get me the better punter, whoever the better punter is. You hope it's Torrey Taylor. You hope it's Cairo Santo. You hope you can keep it rolling, but team's more important than, guys you invested in. Rather just get the best player. So I think we learned a lot about this Bears team. And I think what we learned about this Bears team is going to shape how they approach this offseason. So we're going to take a look at, like, on tomorrow's podcast, we're going to take some of these lessons and try and apply that to, well, what does that mean for free agency then? What does that mean for the NFL draft? What does that mean for potential trades? Whether you're trying to add a big piece potentially on defense or potentially move on from a big piece on offense like DJ Moore or Cole Kmet. Like, we'll kind of take a look at, now that we know this Bears roster a lot better and how they fit with this Bears coaching staff, how does that shape who they're going to re-sign, who they're going to want to go out and what they want to prioritize on this team? So make sure you hit the subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't forget to check out that Everydayers Club if you want access to the ad-free audio feed, as well as an invite to the Locked On Bears Discord group chat in the Locked On Everydayers Club Discord to have even more Bears talk coming your way. But we're never going to go behind a paywall. We'll still be free and available on all platforms, however you currently listen. Just make sure you keep tuning in for your next opportunity to bear down.